2016 USC.
No way.
52-6. That was the game where the USC players were like being held back in the tunnel.
Yeah, they were on all
or whatever.
It's going to be bad. Any particular year
Vandy,
or just in general?
Vandy, y'all weren't ready.
Hello and welcome to Until Saturday, the Athletics College Football Podcast. I am your host, David Ubben, here with the head of the Jason Bean fan club, Chris Vannini, fresh off vacation. Chris, good to see you. Good to see you.
Good to be back.
We have some news. We have some news, Chris. We have some news today. We have a new face.
Here it is.
Hardcore listeners, you might have recognized. But if you're new to the pod, you're new to the feed, we got some news. Damien Harris is joining us. You're going to hear from him a lot on the pod this year. He's a former two-time college football playoff national champion at Alabama, ex-All-SEC running back, third-round pick from the New England Patriots, and as we learned recently, someone who danced on stage with Waka Flocka. I feel confident you're the only college football podcaster with that claim to fame, David. It's Damien Harris, our new co-host of the podcast. You're going to be joining us on our reaction shows, on our preview shows. We are so excited to have you, man.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it, man. I'm super excited. Fresh off retirement, and I get to talk ball. What an opportunity to get up here with you guys and just, talk all things college football and just, really give people something to listen to and, break down the game as best as we can.
Well, you guys are going to get to know Damien a little bit more here in a second. We're going to get to know him a little bit more. We play our Newly Recruit game. We're still workshopping the title, but if you're familiar with the Newlywed Game, it's similar to that. After that, Chris put out the Athletic 134 today, his ranking of all 134 college football teams. I can't believe it, Chris. Everyone agrees that you got all the rankings right, and you don't hate any teams. That's fantastic. It's the first time we've really seen that. Maybe in college football history, it's a big effort to rank every team in college football. But Chris does it. He's going to do it every week this season, as you've done before. Also, Chris, in your intro, I got like the little shimmies or something when you reminded us that you only had to rank 76 teams in 2020. I'd actually forgotten about the athletics.
That was weird. It was like every other week there was more teams that started playing. That was the weirdest season for a million reasons, as we know. But ranking every team became impossible because everybody played a different amount of games.
Yeah. Crazy. Anyway, we're going to dig into the 134, looking at the top teams, the G5, a lot of hot seat coaches conversation. And to cap off the show, we're going to open up the mailbag. And we're going to talk fall weddings. It's a lot of people talking about this. It comes up every single year. We'll see where we stand and how to handle it if you get an invitation in the mail to a fall wedding, particularly on October 12th. And of course, we're going to close by sharing the subtle, quirky, the news you need to know in crunch time. So, folks, we are officially here. Technically, sort of. Chris, we are in week 0, excuse me.
Week 0.
Ireland. We're going to kick off the season. Florida State, Georgia Tech. Chris, how are we feeling with the season this close?
Not only that, we've got a Hawaii game, folks. We've got a Hawaii game.
But is that going to be accessible to most people? It's like Spectrum pay-per-view. I don't like my odds of getting a stream of this game.
They usually figure out somewhere to put the games streaming somewhere on the...
Can we call the CW?
On the net to the United States. So we'll find something for sure.
Damien, this is going to be your first season covering college football. Mm-hmm. How are you feeling? How are you preparing for the year?
Dude, I'm excited. This is my first chance to really just be a fan of the game. Like all of my years playing football and being involved with the game, it was studying, it was hours in film rooms, it was practice, it was rehab, it was, meetings on top of meetings on top of meetings. And I'm just going to be watching and just breaking down the game. And, kind of like I told you guys before we started recording, like I always just sit around watching and, I break down the game next to my wife and I'm like, yeah, this guy should have done this, or like this team is in 12 personnel, or this defense is in dime or nickel. And my wife is just looking at me like, what does that mean exactly? Like, what are you talking about? So it'll definitely be a lot of fun to, just continue to be a fan of the game and just, first and foremost, watch all these kids live out their dreams, right? You get to these Power 5 schools, you get recruited to play at these top-notch programs, and you're just, it's the best time of your life. So, really just getting to sit and watch these guys play, get to watch them put their talents on display for the whole world to see, and then, get to break it down and talk with you guys and, give some good information to the people that'll be listening. I'm super thrilled and excited to be on board.
I did send my wife a text, the first one of our relationship, about Chase Daniel this morning, and she asked, "Who is Chase Daniel?" And I died a little bit inside.
The stories of Ubben's wife, by the way, Ubben's wife is just the most oblivious to sports person I've ever met in my life.
It's impressive.
Sounds a lot like my wife.
My wife's ability to block out all things that she doesn't care about is something that I wish I had, quite frankly.
Yeah. No, my wife is super oblivious. I remember I was having a conversation with her on the couch like maybe 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about if we get a chance to go to an Alabama game or something like that. And I was like, it'll be really cute to take our son, and we got a 5-month-old son. And so we were talking about taking him, and I was like, we can put his little hand in my handprint and my footprint, because when you were captain at Alabama, you did your hand and your footprint at Denny Chimes. And so as soon as I said that, my wife looked at me all crazy, like, "You have your hand in your footprint at Alabama?" I'm like, "Babe, yes." I'm like, yes, I was a captain, of course. Don't forget that you also went to Alabama while I was at Alabama. She just didn't really pay that much attention to me back then, because I was a nobody. I wasn't really popping or anything. But I just had to remind her, because like I said, she's super oblivious. So it'll definitely be good to go from those conversations on the couch to jumping on the pod and just breaking down the game and just really, really enjoying what we do, and just highlighting all the good things, talking about the not so good things, but really just bringing our areas of expertise and just taking this information and applying it and giving it to people.
Well, not only does Damien start next week, we're also going to start doing 3 shows a week next week. We're going to be kind of running a 3-man weave throughout the season, including Damien, including Chris, myself. You guys may have heard Damien on the show a few months ago, or if you listen to the Athletic Football Show with Chase Daniel and my guy Robert Mays, a lot of Mizzou flavor on the Athletic Football Podcast Network. We're going to be flipping the switch and doing that 3 times a week next week. We're very, very excited about that. Once the football season, we're officially starting. Week 0 counts, but it doesn't really count. It's not even really an appetizer course. It's more of an amuse-bouche, if we're being honest. But be sure you subscribe to the podcast feed on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, or for all of our latest episodes. And be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube. Leave us a review on Apple. Some of you guys might be familiar with Damien if you followed Alabama, followed New England, followed Buffalo, all of those things. But for those of you who are not familiar with him, it's time to break the ice, get to know Damien a little bit better. We're going to play the Newly Recruit game again. We're workshopping the name, but it's close.
We're not workshopping it. We're here. We're doing it. There's no more time to workshop.
Yeah, right. We're already in it. We done jumped in the pool.
We're going
I think the workshop is starting now. I think this is the workshop. Either way, we're going to ask Damien a series of questions, and Chris and I are going to try to guess his response based on what we know about him.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get into it. Producer Cam, are you going to be reading the questions, or should I read the questions?
Go for it, David.
Okay. I'm going to read the questions. I'm going to pause and give a chance for Chris and I to answer. And during trivia, we realized that we need to write down our answers.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll figure out what trivia looks like, but we're going to write down our answers, and then we're going to give the floor to Damien to explain. So the first question, Damien, the most memorable college football game that you played in. And here is my guess.
Georgia 2017 championship.
Okay.
Also, I'd like to say that this exercise is outing me as a horrible handwriting person. My wife roasts me.
My wife literally stopped me. It was like, I literally started writing my first answer down, and my wife was like, "Do you want me to write your answers?" Like,
yeah, it's bad.
It's okay. It's okay if you don't want me to. It's okay. Like, I won't be offended, but do you want me to? I was like, no, I'll do it myself.
Yes. So I said the 2017 national championship game against Georgia. What did
Georgia? I'm going with 2018 at LSU.
Okay.
Good guess. Both great guesses. Oh, so I guess it's
what was the actual?
What's the actual answer?
I guess it's my turn now. So I'm gonna start my answer by saying this, because it's funny. I've done this a couple times, and people always ask me like, well, what was your most memorable game? And I've learned that at times I give a couple different answers just because there were so many, right? And there were so many great moments, so many memorable games. So it's hard to pick one. But when I was really thinking, I was like trying to think outside the box. Like, what's something that people like, if you were a fan asking me like, what's your favorite game? What would be the game that you wouldn't necessarily expect, but was still ultra memorable to me? So with that being said, this is my answer right here.
Okay.
FSU 2017, number 1 versus number 3. And I'm going to tell you why. First of all, number 1 versus number 3, that's important because, I mean, this game was branded as like the greatest season opener of all time. Like, of all.
I always remember, by the way, that game opened up with the Taylor Swift song. Look What You Made Me Do. That was the intro for that game. Like for like a month, ESPN was playing the commercial with that song for that game. I always associate that with that game for whatever reason.
Yeah, right. So it was 1 versus 3. It was the biggest college football opener of all time, right? And after that game, like I really left feeling like we kind of destroyed Florida State's program because they tanked for a little while after that.
Yeah.
They were not doing so hot after that game because I remember they lost DeAndre Francois, who was their starting quarterback. And I mean, we just railroaded these guys, right? But what really made it the most memorable to me, like outside of, the fact that it was number 1 versus number 3, or, we kind of decimated the Florida State program was, I remember the first play of the game, I had like a breakout 40-yard run.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up with maybe either right close to 100 yards or, maybe a little bit under, but I ended up scoring a touchdown and I blocked a punt. So, stepping into my 3rd year when I knew that like I was really going to be the guy, like I was going to be RB1, I was going to be a guy that was on the team, that was important, that had a role, obviously not just on offense, but on special teams as well. Being able to start the game off, first play, boom, pop it off, 40-yard run, gave the whole team confidence. Everybody knew like, all right, we're ready to play. Like, this is one of our guys. We gave him the ball on the first snap of the game and he took it 40 yards, almost turned it into a touchdown. Had I not stepped out of bounds, would have been a touchdown. Like, we're ready. And then I think, and like I said, blocking a punt on special teams, like that just really made me feel like I was stepping into my own. And again, not just as a running back, but as a complete football player. Like I've got a role on offense. I did my role. I've got a role on special teams. I affected the kicking game. And then, like I said, we ended up routing them, on the scoreboard. So, the hype around the game, kind of the following steps for their program after the game, but also just the way that I played in that game. Like I said, popping it off, being reliable all game long, making a difference in the kicking game, kind of all the things that Coach Saban preaches, right? Like you have a job to do, whatever your job is, you got to go out and do it. So I would say just the hype around it, the way that we left their program in shambles and, the way I was able to go out there and really, step through the door of becoming like a really good player at a really high level, all of those things together really like it sticks out like a sore thumb to me as a most memorable game for sure.
Yeah, I think I was covering Michigan, Florida that day. So I only got to see the second half of that game.
Yeah.
I was at Michigan, Florida too. That was at World, right?
AT&T. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, down in Jerry's World.
Okay. Damien.
Yep. Next.
Who is your favorite running back this season? Chris, I will let you go first this time.
All right, Chris, who you got?
Taj Brooks, Texas Tech.
Okay.
A back who reminds me a lot of Darian. He's 5'10", runs like you. Had I think more than 1,500 yards last year. That's my pick.
Okay.
So I was looking for some guys that kind of reminded me a little bit of Damien too, because when a guy you see it on screen, you can't help but be drawn to them. Mm-hmm. And I remember you as a power guy, but we had a little bit of speed also, and that screamed two guys to me.
Okay.
That would be Mr. Travion Henderson at Ohio State or Omarion Hampton at North Carolina. Those were the two guys.
You can't make two guesses. What is this?
Yeah. I can't. There's no rules.
I was going to say, I think you cheated on the new.
All's fair in love and war in the newly recruit game.
Yeah, I was going to say, you definitely cheated. But, house rules, and we are the house. So all is fair. Although you guys had some good guesses, I would have to go with Mr. Quinshawn Judkins. This is my guy. And when I say I love this guy and everything that he brings to the football field, I mean capital LOVE. This guy finishes every single run. And honestly, he reminds me of myself. Like that's when I turn on his tape. And as I've been studying, all these great running backs going into this year, when I turned on his tape, whenever I noticed the way he finished runs, and you can especially see it when he's down on the goal line, he's always falling forward. His shoulders are always in front of his knees. He's always finishing with an extra 1-2 yards of contact, of extra yards gained after contact. But he's also got that home run ability. He's got the ability to take something 60 yards. He's got the ability to make a guy miss in a crowded room in a phone booth, and then, like I said, take it 60 yards. So whenever I looked at his finishing ability and his playmaking ability, his change of direction, his short area quickness, those are all the great signs of a great running back. So him alongside with Travion Henderson at Ohio State, who would have been my second pick for my favorite running back coming into this year. I think those two, I think that's going to be a pretty damaging tandem this year for all of college football.
I think I should get half a point for that. I think
I'll give it 2
points for that.
I'll give it 2.
And also, I think that it is. I feel much better about Quinshon now that the update to the NCAA football game has calmed down the spin move. It was too much.
It was a lot. It was a lot. It was.
It was infuriating, and now nobody's spamming it. So our next question, Damien, the college football team that you hated to play the most. I will go first.
If either of you get this wrong, I'd be very shocked.
Okay. The obvious answer is Auburn, but you're not from Alabama.
Correct.
So I think that you should hate Auburn, but I think the team that you really hate is the one that if they didn't exist, you might be a 4-time national champion instead of a 2-time national championship. That is the Clemson Tigers. Again, I'm sorry for my handwriting.
My answer?
Clemson there it Tigers.
Is. My answer is the.
There we go. There we go.
We got one.
And you know what really pissed me off about about Clemson, excuse me, is not the fact that, again, because like you said, without them, I very well could be sitting here a 4-time national champion. Very well could be. But what really pissed me off about Clemson was the fact that all year they play in the ACC and they play teams who aren't nearly the level of competition that we play at. They don't practice the way that we practice. They didn't do things the way that we do them. So all year long, and we knew that they were good enough to eventually be in the playoffs. They were going to be in the ACC championship, whatever. And we knew that we were going to have to see them. And we always thought, these guys aren't built the same way that we are. They don't play the same strength of schedule. They don't have the same training camp practices that we have. They just don't get it. They don't do it. They don't do what is required of you to be one of the top schools in the country. And then every year when we had to play them, they just showed us that everything that we thought about them was wrong. It was all wrong. Other than, I would say, my junior year when we played them in the, what was it? It was either I think it was the Cotton Bowl, maybe. It was either the Cotton Bowl or the Sugar Bowl. We played them down in New Orleans, and the Sugar Bowl. We beat up on them pretty good. But other than that, those other 3 times we played them, it was just dogfight. And we've been sitting here, and I can say truthfully, my senior year when we were undefeated, we knew they were undefeated, we were undefeated, but we had totally different strengths of schedules. We had totally different players. We knew that they were not supposed to be on the field with us, and they went out there and they kicked the lining out of our asses. I mean, they just destroyed us. So yeah, I don't like Clemson. I don't like the orange. I know that there's that video of that dude talking about I hate that Tennessee orange. I hate Clemson orange. I hate the purple. I hate that hill that they run down whenever they are playing at home. I hate everything about them, to be honest. So
the hill is kind of amazing because the potential for injury is off the chart.
It's great. And I'm surprised that Dabo has not tumbled down there yet, honestly.
I think, we've seen who was it at Oklahoma that the guy fell down and got trampled last year? Years ago. Was it Oklahoma or Michigan? I forget. But that was a good club. I'm surprised we don't see that more at the Hill.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Next question. We're going to get into the future here. How many games will Alabama win this season under Kalen DeBoer? First year without Nick Saban. The last game that Alabama played without Nick Saban was coached by Joe Kynes in the Independence Bowl. One of the greatest YouTube clips maybe in the history of college football. If you don't know what I'm talking about,
I've seen.
Go look up Joe Kine's halftime speech at the Independence Bowl against Oklahoma State. It's incredible.
We need
Chris,
to make that a drop on the show.
We do.
Sure.
We gotta get that. We gotta get that old inside trap. Anyway, Chris, how many games do you think Damien thinks they're going to win?
So we're going just regular season here because in the 12-team playoff era, it's kind of hard to predict. So I'm going with 10. 10-2 in the regular season.
Okay.
I also have 10. I think this is going to be a good Bama team.
Okay.
But I think that's where we land. I think this just the schedule and all of the adjustments and the new SEC. I went with 10-2. Damien.
Okay.
What's your pick?
I went 9 wins.
Okay. How come?
So see my face. I think 10 wins is and this is just kind of going off the old Bama way and the standard that is Alabama. A 10-win season, you should never be below that. Like, I don't care who's coaching. I don't care who's playing. Like, from the standard that is set at Alabama, a 10-win season is almost kind of like, okay, yeah, you won 10 games and like, what else? You know what I mean? That should be pretty standard procedure. I just think that with the transition from Nick Saban to Kalen DeBoer, I think that you look at, some of the players who have hit the transfer portal because they were a little bit unsure. I think it takes that 10th win it's going to have to come against a good opponent, an Oklahoma or, maybe even like a Wisconsin early in the year, or like a great Power 5 school that, has rich football history. You're playing on the road. There's going to be a lot of things that come up that are going to be like, how do we overcome this? And the way that you overcome some of those things is by having, a coach that's been there for a while, players who have been there and played together for a while. And that way you're in certain situations and it's like, okay, well, we're playing a good team and they're throwing their best shots at us. We've got to come together, get our guys together, rally the troops, and go out and perform, execute, do all the things that we need to do to win this game. Whenever you've got so many new pieces, moving parts, and not to overlook the glaring obvious, which is the fact that Nick Saban is not coaching there. And that definitely leaves a question mark in a lot of people's minds. I think that a lot of those things can either help you win a game or help you lose a game. Now, I like to be on the safe side. And, with Coach DeBoer coming in, like, everybody has these great expectations of like, well, he's got to do this to live up to Coach Saban's name. Coach DeBoer needs to go and be the best version of Coach DeBoer. And with him being a new coach in a new place that has a lot of expectations, with a lot of guys who have either left or are a little, let's see how this goes. To me, that gives you a throwaway game. That gives you a game against, like I said, like a Wisconsin at the beginning of the year that you very well should win because you've got more talented players, you've got better coaches, but you just haven't quite figured everything out yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's early in the year. You're still working out some of the kinks. You're still working out some of the new coaching staff, the new players, team chemistry. There are a lot of things that can either go really well or really wrong. So I think 9 is a safe bet, but I definitely think that they do have the potential to win 10, 11, maybe 12.
That schedule's tough, man. They play 5 preseason top 16 teams. You got Georgia.
They're going up.
You got Missouri at home. You got to go to Tennessee. You got to go to LSU. You got to go to Oklahoma. Auburn at the end of the year is always tough. So yeah, we'll see. I don't think the Alabama fans will be happy with 9-3 at all. 9-3 probably doesn't get you in the playoff. It'll be close, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think we've referenced it, but I think that. And this famous last word, so maybe we'll be wrong this year. But I think it's very, very possible in the 12-team playoff era, in the Super Conference era, that Michigan will be the last undefeated national champion for a long, long time. Yeah. We'll see.
I would be willing to say that.
Yeah, our next question, there's a preamble to it. Okay. Last week, Manti Te'o talked about how intimidating the 2013 Alabama squad, a little bit before you got on the scene, Damien, was in the national championship. We're going to play that clip if you haven't heard it.
And I do remember this very vividly. My soon-to-be teammate, DJ Fluker, and Chance Warmack come running out of the locker room with their jerseys
tucked underneath.
No, it's up. Their big bellies are out. And they have their fours up. And I remember DJ going by and saying, womp, 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 womp. And I remember vividly remembering the silence behind me. And I kind of glanced back at my teammates and the eyes on them were so large, I knew at that time, I was like, all right, this is going to be a long day.
Oh, no.
To my guys' credit, they never flinched. But let me tell you guys, when we played that Alabama team in 2013, there was a difference. There was a difference with those Bama boys.
Yeah, that was the 2012 Alabama team beating
excuse the 6 smile I had on my face whenever they came back from the video.
Shout out to Big Eddie Lacy. What he did to that Notre Dame team,
my God,
I think was illegal in like 41 states. That was rough. So the question, Damien, for you is, do you have a memorable oh no, or you can smell fear on an opponent coming into a game? So Chris, I'll give you the first guess on this one.
2016 USC.
No way.
52-6. That was the game where the USC players were like being held back in the tunnel.
Yeah, they were on all floors,
or whatever. And I think that was Jalen Hurts' first game, I think.
Yes, it was. I covered that game.
It was a rout. It was never even close.
Yeah.
That's my pick.
Okay.
My pick, USC 2016.
Oh, wow.
I think that team, listen, you're USC, but I think that there was a lot of SEC mystique around that. I don't know what the status of Clay Helton's feel in the locker room was at that point, but I don't feel like it probably was great.
Yeah.
So I feel like outside of the barking dogs moment, I think that team probably knew what was coming. Damien, do you have a specific memory of a team that you knew was going to be bad? Any particular year or just in general?
Vandy, y'all weren't ready. Y'all were not ready. Listen, I'll tell you this, and I've told this story many a times, and, it never gets old. But, going into that game and, going into every game, really being in Alabama, like we did everything we could to psych ourselves out, and we did everything we could to like find internal motivation. Because every week we knew we were the better team. We knew we had the better coaches. We knew we had the better players, but, we needed something to motivate us to still go out and be our best. Right. Well, this week, whenever we played Vandy, what was that, back in 2017?
Yeah.
Back in 2017, whenever my boy came out and said, Alabama, you're next. Like, when I tell you that whole week, there was zero extra motivation. Like, Coach Saban didn't have to give any speeches. There was no bulletin board material that was put all over the locker room. Like, we knew what we had to do whenever we showed up to Vanderbilt. Like, we 100% knew what we were there to do, who we were there to do it to, how it needed to be done. And that was it. And so we get to the game and, we're in the locker room and you can hear a pin drop in there because nobody's talking. Coach Saban's not giving his usual speech. He's not doing his deal. He's just kind of sitting there waiting for the clock to hit 2 minutes. That way we can say our prayer and go out and play. And so once the time hits, he's like, all right, you guys ready? We said, yeah. And then we got out there. And from that moment, whenever we walked back onto the field for the last time, and because like at that moment, you can't turn around and go back. You can't walk out. You can't like, nah, you know what? I take back what I said. Like, no. Once we went out there for that 2 minute warning, and, the national anthem and all that stuff, like you could look across the sideline and you could feel an overwhelming sense of like everybody on Vanderbilt's team looking at that one guy and being like, what did you do? Like, what did you sign us up for? Because like literally just from like the opening kickoff, looking across at their sideline, like we could all smell the fear. We could see it on their face. We could smell it on them. Like it was just like, we were like a pack of rabid dogs. Like once you smelt that first drop of fear, like we were just like, because I remember we would like look at each other like, y'all see them over there? Like they're not like, look at them. Look like look in their eyes. Like they do not want what we're about to bring to the table. And they did not. Like I said, as soon as we came out for that last time before the game started, like you could smell it on them. Like you could smell it on their fans. You could smell it on the players, the coaches. Like every time a player made a play, the coach was just like, I don't know what to tell you guys. I don't know what to do. So yeah, Vandy, like I said, the week leading into it, we knew what we had to do. And then once we got in there and once they closed the gate, we always talk about once you go out there and we close these gates, like they don't get open until somebody comes out a winner. So once they closed the gates behind us, it was over.
Vandy was 3-0 coming into that game. They lost 59-0. They had
beaten a top 20 K-State team the week before.
Yeah.
That's what sort of prompted it.
Yeah.
But that was a pretty good team. That team won 8 games. And that Vandy team that you guys played, you might have broke them because they did not win another SEC game until their finale against a Tennessee team that had fired Butch Jones and was ready to move on.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, we were very much about kind of like you just alluded to, like breaking people's will, like we talked about Florida State earlier. Like that was we wanted to be the Grim Reapers. Like it wasn't just like, oh, okay, we play y'all, we beat y'all, and then we leave. Like, no, we want to do something to y'all. Like we want to mess with your psychoanalysis. Like we want to mess with you up here. Like we want to beat you so bad that right here you start to think like, am I cut out to do this? Can I play with these guys? Like, can I, like what, like, why am I even out here? And we did, clearly with Florida State. I mean, Vandy, and this is no disrespect because I got a lot of brothers that played at Vandy. They weren't in a great place. And then after that, they still weren't in a great place. So, that's the Bama way.
Well, thank you, Damien. We're excited to have you on the show full time. You got a little taste today. And if you have some questions for Damien, we're done asking him questions today. If you got some, leave us a voicemail or a text on the Until Saturday phone line. That's 316-462-9852. That is 316-462-9852. I need to come up with a jingle for that number or something. You can also drop us a mailbag question on the Athletic website for subscribers or tweet at us. Our handles are in the show's description. When we come back, it's time to unveil Chris's Athletic 134 to start the season. You're going to be updating this week to week, but for now, where did he differ from the AP poll? Who is the top G5 team? We're going to split them up into some tiers, and who's number 1? We'll be back with all of that. We're going to go through it here in a moment. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks, Damien. We'll see you next week, buddy.
So see you next week.
Welcome back, and it's time to talk about the Athletic 134. Chris, you've been doing this for a while for us. I think you're insane for doing it. It's a great way to get people very angry with you all the time. And there's always an opportunity every week, Chris. So congratulations for that. I'm going to be doing the bubble watch for us this year, so I get a little bit of a taste of that. Chris, how do you do this?
Well, for people who haven't read it, by the way, it's on theathletic.com, all 134.
Yes, the full link to this is in the show's description.
I'm gonna read the entire list right now. Number 1, Ohio State. Number 2, Georgia. So it's I find it fun because I love all of college football. Like I find Tulane as interesting as Tennessee, and the bottom 10 teams, your UMasses, your Kennesaws, like. It's a fun puzzle to put together every week. The preseason one is the easiest because I'm not wrong. There's nothing that can be wrong about it. It's whatever I want to do, pretty much. It gets harder every week as we go on when there's more data points coming in and all that. And I do really take it seriously. Like I know a lot of other places do full rankings. Some of them don't address what they did. Some of them don't have comments. Some of them are just there to take up space. Like I write out the whole thing. It takes me several hours every Sunday to do. I look at the advanced stats. I see where different teams are. I take that all into account. But in the end, it is just a subjective ranking of what I feel. And as it goes on, I lean heavily on what you've done. I got a lot of heat from Michigan fans last year because I had them much lower than the polls. I just kept saying, wait till you play Penn State and Ohio State, then you're good. And they did, and they won, and they moved up. So you'll get people who get mad at that week to week. People get mad at everything. Nobody ever comments great lists. It's not really a thing that people do.
I'm going to start doing that every week now, Chris. It will be first comment at 5:30 in the morning as soon as it goes live. Great list, David.
Yeah. I tell you what, every Monday morning I'm terrified to wake up and the first comment is, how do you put this team over this team when they just beat the other team and it's a mistake and I got to fix it? That's my nightmare every Monday morning.
Well, Chris, it's funny because there are a lot of ranking systems. There's the AP poll, there's the coaches poll, neither of which has any influence on the committee at this point. But it is a good snapshot of kind of where we are and the perception of those teams. Penn State did not make your top 10, Chris.
Nope.
Why not? Why not?
I'm skeptical still. I need to see it before I believe it. I know everybody's like, oh, Penn State, they're the team that's going to be most benefiting from a 12-team playoff, but like Drew Aller didn't look great.
Yeah.
Still have concerns about him. They didn't add any amazing wide receivers to fix that problem. One of the problems for Drew Aller is that nobody gets open. That's a problem. And I do like Andy Kolnicki, the offensive coordinator who came from Buffalo, but it's kind of like, I need to see it before I believe it. I put Mizzou over Penn State. I put Utah over Penn State. Penn State I have, by the way, I didn't say it, but Penn State I have at number 12.
Mm-hmm.
I've got Mizzou at 10, Utah at 11, Penn State 12, LSU 13. So that's my feeling on Penn State. Am I wrong to be skeptical of Penn State and what they can do on offense?
No, because we've seen them against elite competition. I think it does matter that they smacked almost everybody else, but when the lights are brightest and you watch them play Ohio State, a good Ohio State team, we've seen much better Ohio State teams, and a really good Michigan team that didn't throw the ball for a quarter and a half, 2 quarters, something like that, 30-something plays. You just look real mortal. And that is something that really hurts you in the court of public opinion. I think for me, I'm with you on that. Yes, Drew Aller's receivers had trouble getting open. But for me, my biggest skepticism is Drew Aller is you're missing a lot of throws that you just have to have. And I say it all the time. If you have a quarterback who, when he has a clean pocket, when he has an open receiver, can complete that pass 90% of the time, you're way ahead of the game in college football. And Penn State, I don't think has that. And that's a problem. So I'm with you on the Penn State skepticism. I'm also with you, Chris, on a little, I don't know if we can call it hype, but some Virginia Tech buzz. They are unranked in the AP poll. You have them 24th. Why? And did Kyron Jones's mom pay you, or why do you have this team so high?
Yeah, I've got Virginia Tech at 24. They were unranked, I think, in both the AP and the coaches polls. I like this team. I think they've really turned the corner under Brent Pry. They won 6 of their last 9 last year after it was a really rough first year and start to the season last year. They lost to Marshall. But I think we saw them come together late last year. They bring a ton back. Drones, like you said, at quarterback. So I'm seeing a big season out of Virginia Tech. I've got them in the preseason top 25.
Here's where we diverge, Chris. I had USC on my list of sleeper teams last week. I think they are slightly underrated. I think there's a lot of upside when you have a really talented team and possibly a renewed sense of commitment and better defensive scheme with Danton Lynn. Chris, you have them at 33. The AP has them at 23. Why do you hate USC?
Look, I just it's sliding in a bad direction, and you don't have Caleb Williams there anymore. Did you see what Caleb Williams is doing in the preseason right now for the Bears? He's a really good player, and Miller Moss looked great in that bowl game. But like, need to see more there. There are absolutely questions there, and the defense should be better because it can't be worse. USC was 23 in the AP poll, by the way. I had them at 33, which is not like that big of a difference. I mean, I mostly have them behind some G5 teams in Louisville and like kind of the West Virginia, NC States of the world. And you know, schedule's tougher. They got to go to Michigan early. They got LSU in week 1. They got Penn State. They got to go. They got Rutgers, who's a really solid team. They closed with Notre Dame. So like, it's not trending in a good way there. I think they'll be fine. Like, I don't think they're going to crash and burn, but like, you know, I think we have more questions about that team than we think.
Chris, there's a lot of legitimate debate in preseason about number 1. There's pretty good cases for, I would say, 3 teams. But we're going to talk a lot about Ohio State and Georgia. You had Ohio State over Georgia, the team that everybody sort of thought was the best team last year for most of the season until they lost the SEC championship. Why the Buckeyes over the Bulldogs?
I just love everything that Ohio State has coming back. Like, everything about this year's Ohio State team screams last year's Michigan team, except for maybe the quarterback. But you've got Quinshon Judkins, a really good running back, coming in to complement Travion Henderson, a very good running back. You've got a good offensive line back. Defensive line, JTT came back. You've added Caleb Downs in the secondary. They had so many guys who could have gone to the NFL and decided to stay another year. The receivers, even losing Marvin Harrison, you're adding Jeremiah Smith, who may be elite, on top of what is probably the best receiving core in the country already. I just think this Ohio State team is complete top to bottom. I think it's possible they go undefeated even in a 12-team playoff era and go I think that'd be like 16-0 or something like that. I just like Will Howard, he just has to be solid and fine. There's so much talent around him that if that works, they'll be okay. And so I just really, really like what this Ohio State team has. I think it's the most complete team top to bottom. But I know everybody else has Georgia. What do you think?
I'm kind of with you on Ohio State. I want to see a little bit more explosiveness from Georgia. Obviously, they've had some off-season issues. Ra Thomas now no longer on the team. That's going to be a big deal. Oscar Delp, I really like his upside, but he's not Brock Bowers. Defensively, I think they're going to be great. They're going to be tested in the SEC, but I just think in terms of upside and potential, this Ohio State team looks a little different for me. Our playoff prospectus series, by the way, sponsored by Allstate, up on The Athletic. Look for a full breakdown of those teams by our beat writers on The Athletic. I actually helped out with the Ohio State prospectus. Cam T did that. Talk some opposing coaches about how they look at Ohio State. And one of the weaknesses on that team, and this happened last year when we talked, they did a coach's confidential going into the Penn State game. People don't love this offensive line. And the tackles, you go back and you look at, especially, in the bowl game, the way that they played against Mizzou, they really got beat up front. I think
the bowl game was I kind of look at that. I covered that Cotton Bowl game, which was the most boring game I've ever covered in my life. Ari was with me. He was sick. He got me sick. Cam was there. It was just a mess. Good on Mizzou for winning. Like, it all counts and everything. But that was an Ohio State team that was very much not the Ohio State team. I just want to say that. But
I'd like to see a little bit more from your offensive line throughout the season, especially now you've got all these pieces. You mentioned Judkins, you mentioned Henderson, you've got really good receivers. So I think Jeremiah Smith could be really special. Like, Buka is back. That's going to be, especially at the tackle spot, they're going to have to be really, really good. And I think you mentioned Will Howard. Most people I talked to about Will Howard are like, he's a good player, okay player. One of the coaches I talked to was like, he's not going to be the guy that loses you games, but I don't know that he's going to be the reason you go out and win. But it's kind of amazing that we've talked about Ohio State for this long, Chris, and we haven't talked about Chip Kelly. Kind of a big deal that he's now in the room. I think he's a really good fit with Will Howard. So I think for me, you look at the strengths of that team, the defensive front, adding Caleb Downs is huge. I love that experience. The backs, this might be the best 1-2 punch at running back since when, man? It's been a while.
It's one of those Alabama teams that had Damien Harris or Bo Scarborough.
Yeah, maybe it's like it's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy how good those backs are going to be.
You mentioned Chip Kelly though. Like, Chip Kelly at UCLA, like, say what you will, wasn't recruiting well, NIL, all this other things. The guy can scheme up run plays in a big way, and did that in a very special type of way at UCLA, where they were constantly putting running backs in the NFL. They were leading the Pac-12 in rushing. Partly why Deshaun Foster ends up getting the job. The passing concepts, you got to work on that for sure as he takes over this offense. But I trust his ability, even if you have some questions with that line, to take advantage of these running backs and what they have there.
Chris, we know a lot about Georgia. We mentioned some of them. The defensive front, they're kind of reloading there, but they still have a lot of returning guys. Malachi Starks is a really exciting guy. Nazir Stackhouse, Jason Dumas Johnson, all those guys. What concerns you about the Georgia team? What kept them from being number one, I guess? Or the thing that, if this Georgia team doesn't win the national championship or trips up a couple times in SEC play, what are the weaknesses you think are going to be on display in those moments?
It's the receivers. And I think if you looked at Seth Emerson, our SEC writer, had a big prospectus preview on Georgia on Monday, and he got some quotes from our forward defense coordinator who said the same thing. He said the receivers, they're not special. they could be very good. But when you lose Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey, guys who I think were both like top 3 rounds NFL draft picks, you have Ra Thomas kicked off the team. Like, there are concerns. Guys are going to have to emerge. Still think this is going to be a very, very good team. Carson Beck may be the number 1 pick and a Heisman Trophy winner. I have them at number 2, not at number 15. But it's
all relative.
The explosive plays, like you said, can they get those on the outside and in the passing game? That's what I need to see.
I think that there's a lot of coaches around the league that would say that Brock Bowers is the best player in the SEC probably each of the last 2 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
I think the public probably wouldn't say that necessarily because we like numbers, we like stats, we like highlights. And, Brock had his share of highlights, but I think in terms of the guys that watch more tape, than anybody, they came away with it. You talk to a lot of coaches and you'd find, I have yet to talk to a coach who'd watch Brock Bowers and be like, he's kind of overrated. Like that's not something that happens. So we'll see. We're going to go down the buckets, the tiers, whatever we want to call them, Chris. We're going to talk about the title favorites 1 through 7. We've hit on Ohio State. We've hit on Georgia. We're going to cut that off at Notre Dame at number 7. They've had some injuries in the preseason. We'll see how this Riley Leonard marriage goes with Mike Denbrock coming in after coaching Jaden Daniels to a Heisman Trophy. Are you buying Notre Dame still as a team that can compete, dare I say, win a national title?
Yeah, I mean, like, as I do the 134, teams kind of end up in tiers anyway, just kind of end up getting grouped that way. And I'd say 1 to 7 here is the teams that we feel very confident about making the playoff. Ohio State, Georgia, Oregon, Texas, Alabama, Ole Miss, Notre Dame. Like, those are kind of the favorites, I think, to make the playoff. And Notre Dame, you lose a starting tackle in camp for the year. That's a big deal. Riley Leonard is coming off of an injury. That is a big deal. They added some receivers in the portal to fix something that has been a problem. But we need to see it first. However, that schedule is very, very, very manageable. If you can beat Texas A&M in week 1, you're probably favored the rest of the way in every single game. Florida State, we'll see. But so that is where I think that top 7 group, because then Michigan's at number 8. In Michigan, we don't know. Florida State, we don't know. I that top 7 is the group that it's like, we feel comfortable that there's a really good chance that they're making the playoff.
Mm-hmm. I'm a little skeptical on Alabama. Our new co-host, Damien Harris, former Alabama star, also kind of skeptical on this Alabama transition. You have them at number 5, Chris. Why?
Well, I really, really like what Kalen DeBoer does with quarterbacks. He's got a really good quarterback. I mean, I trust. Remember, Jalen Milroe a year ago, we had no idea who was going to start for Alabama. He didn't play against USF. Now he's coming in. We're like, he is the guy. And SEC Media Days, he was incredibly confident. Obviously lost a couple pieces in the portal, but I always trust that staff and Kalen DeBoer to get the most out of guys, especially their quarterback. And I think they're going to be okay.
We're going to run down the maybes briefly. That's
by the way, what do you think? You're skeptical of Alabama. What are your concerns?
So I'm going to preface this by saying it's a big if, but if you can take away Jalen Milroe's legs, it feels like he gets mortal in a hurry. Now he's got some pretty amazing legs, and it's really hard to take those away. And when he thrived late last season, they really figured out how to get him outside of the pocket, get him on the run, make defenses be thinking about his legs while also running. I know a lot of us are experiencing the same thing in college football 25 on the video game. But if you can keep him in the pocket, I don't love him as a passer. And they did lose a lot at receiver. I like him. I like it. But Isaiah Bond, those guys are gone. We'll kind of see what they find at receiver. So
I do like it if Alabama can snap the ball to him. Pretty cleanly. That will help.
I don't know what that. I mean, they've had some issues with that. Like it wasn't as.
It was a problem.
As it was.
It was a big problem.
It wasn't as bad as it was in the Michigan game all season. I don't know. I think that's one of those things that, like, I don't know a lot about the psyche of. I'm not even going to call it long snapping. That's just snapping. But it feels a little bit like the yips and putting, or like if you get the shanks on the range, like once you hit a couple, you're going to keep doing it over and over again. Like that was surreal to watch. I was covering the Sugar Bowl and I was watching that game in the bowels of the Superdome, and it was surreal watching some of those snaps just like over and over again. So I think Alabama's good. I mean, at the end of the day, they're still, I don't know what the talent composite is, but my guess would be they're still the second most talented team in the country. Probably right behind Georgia. Ohio State's probably pretty close. But so there's something to be said for that. But I think with all the transition, all of the pressure, and a new staff, I think they're gonna, and with the schedule, I think they're gonna trip up 2-3 times. I'm kind of, if it was me picking, I think 9-3 makes a little sense for Alabama. I think they're probably the.
You just picked 10-2 earlier in the spot. You just picked
no.
10-2
That's what I thought
podcast.
Damien was going to say. That's what I thought.
Okay.
If it was up to me, I'd say 9-3. So
okay,
but I think I went 9. I think I picked Bama to go 9-3 last year. So maybe I'm just an Alabama hater, which we have perhaps a voicemail who believes that we are skeptical of the Tide. But anyway, so we're going to go on to what we're going to call the maybes. That's 8 through 17. That is Michigan, Florida State, Missouri, and Utah, Penn State, LSU, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Clemson, and Miami. I like the word maybe, especially kind of for the back half of those teams, as teams that we think can be okay. I don't know what to think about Oklahoma. They're really actually one of the teams that I don't know what to make of them coming into the season. There's so many variables for them. There's the looming Oregon thing where you kind of gently nudge Dylan Gabriel out the door into perhaps a better situation. And you're like, we're all in with Jackson Arnold. What do you make of the Sooners going into a season with a lot of transition, and they seem to bounce back from a rough year one under Brent Venables, but it's going to get tougher this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think Jackson Arnold was going to be the guy. And like you said, you kind of nudge Dylan Gabriel out the same way I think Will Howard kind of gets nudged out of Kansas State because Avery Johnson's taking over there. Just something you're going to see. I don't know what to think either, because like I was at Oklahoma SMU last year, and SMU held up in the trenches against this Oklahoma team, like to an alarming level, to which a couple weeks later, I go to the Cotton Bowl for Texas, Oklahoma, and I'm thinking Texas is going to win big. And instead, Oklahoma wins that game. People forget Oklahoma beat Texas last year. And so it's really back and forth. It's been really hard to get that. I think it was the Alamo Bowl out of my head. The 6 turnovers against Arizona. Jackson Arnold, I think, threw 3 interceptions. I know it's a bowl game. I know not everybody plays. I know bowl games are weird. But that has just kind of like stuck in my head of like, I need to see that Jackson Arnold and Oklahoma have moved past this. They've been building and getting better under Brent Venables' last couple of years, but they fell to a level that they had not been in a long time. And it helps that the schedule is favorable this year as well. But that's why they're a maybe. It's like if Jackson Arnold is as good as we think he can be and they're better in the trenches, then yeah, Oklahoma could be right there in playoff contention. But those are some pretty big questions.
I think they're one of the teams that has a really wide set of possible outcomes, which I don't know is necessarily true for a lot of teams. But Oklahoma, like if you told me Oklahoma won the SEC, let's say Oklahoma wins the SEC, I don't think I'd be falling out of my chair. I'd be like, wow, that's pretty impressive. Jackson Arnold must be great. But it's definitely on the table. And if you told me that Oklahoma went 7-5 and it didn't go great, I would also say like, yeah, I mean, I could see that. New coach, new conference. I don't think Venables necessarily has things going quite in the same way that Bob Stoops did back in the day. So I think maybe is the perfect name for them. Utah, you have at number 11. Am I oversimplifying things, Chris, to say that if Cam Rising is healthy, and I guess we'll throw Brent Keithy in there too. If Brent Keithy's healthy, also Utah wins the Big 12 and maybe doesn't by a wide margin, but like is clearly the best team in a very wide open Big 12. And if he's not, Utah's going to be a pain in the butt for a lot of teams, but they're going to be the most annoying 8-4 team maybe in Big 12 history.
Look, they won 8 games last year without him, which is in a really difficult Pac-12 that might have been.
And it wasn't just him. They lost a bunch of dudes last year. They were like the most injured team in the country.
and still won 8 games. That's just why you kind of have to believe in Utah every year. They bring most of that really good defense back. They're playing in a conference that is not as good as they played last year. Cam Rising, I know we haven't seen him much, and quarterbacks who are out for a very long time, it's hard to say if they're ever going to get it back. But I'm going to give Utah the benefit of the doubt because I think they always deserve that. And yeah, if Cam Rising can beat Cam Rising, team that can win 9-10 games, clear favorite to win the Big 12. But
it's interesting because in all of realignment, everybody moves up to tougher leagues. And last year, I mean, the Pac-12 hasn't been better than the Big 12 every year. Last year, it clearly was. And this Utah team brings back a lot. I don't recall in the history of, well, I say history, the 2 decades that we've been really paying attention to realignment in college football. Can you recall a team going to an easier conference?
I mean, unless you're dropping down to the group of 5, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, most of the Big East teams went to the ACC, which not really. And then
might be Idaho dropping out of FBS. That might be the only other team that we're talking about. So that's going to be interesting to me because this Big 12 this year is a really good conference. It's a really fun conference. But last year's Pac-12 had some elite teams and elite talents, and I'm going to be very intrigued to see how that plays out. In the ACC, we have 2 maybes, Clemson and Florida State. Neither one of them in your top 5. Florida State at number 9, Clemson at 16. Why 7 spots between those 2 teams, Chris?
Well, because one is very much trending downward and one is trending upward. I mean, Florida State, they lost a lot off of last year's team, Jordan Travis particularly, Jared Verse and some other guys, but they have been just hitting on the portal like nobody else. GJ Uwangalele played solid at Oregon State last year.
Nice year.
I like him. I like him coming back to the ACC. In Clemson, I just have questions about. They have not been at receiver, at quarterback, at defensive line, just what they were when they were pissing off Damien Harris and the Alabama teams of a few years ago. They just haven't been there. Maybe year 2 under Garrett Riley as the OC, maybe things click a little bit better, but I'm not a Cade Klubnik believer yet. And so, I mean, Clemson at 16, like, they won 9 games last year. They got it together, but even putting in that high felt a little weird to me. What do you think about Clemson?
Klubnik is an interesting guy because before they played in the Orange Bowl against Tennessee, his first career start, I did a pretty deep profile of him, talked to a lot of people around him, talked to people who kind of knew him. And it seemed like he was just sort of created in a lab to become the next great college quarterback. And we haven't seen that at all. How much of that is Cade Klubnik being maybe not what people thought he was? How much of that is he doesn't have any great receivers like we've seen at Clemson? How much of that is you bring in Garrett Riley, but you're not running Garrett Riley's offense? I don't know the answers to those questions. I suspect it's not one thing. I think, is it possible that all those things are true? Maybe Cade Klubnik isn't as good as people thought. Maybe Garrett Riley's offense is not really the Garrett Riley offense that helped carry TCU to a national title game. And maybe the receiver, well, I think we could all agree the receivers have not been great. If Bo Collins is probably still going to be their number 1 guy, I think. So we haven't seen that Cade Klubnik game. And watching, was it the Duke game, the opener? They just got bullied, right? That was very concerning.
A lot of turnovers.
Yes. Because there was a lot of turnovers, but they were kind of getting a little pushed around in that game. So I think Clemson's probably about right. I'm a little more skeptical on Florida State. Florida State felt like they were playing with some house money last year, and now you're kind of hitting the reset button. And it feels like, especially when the Alabama search was coming up, it felt like people were just kind of accepting that Mike Norvell was like one of the great college football coaches of our time right now. And I'm like, he did a good job. I think he's a good coach. I didn't forget all of the Florida State consternation that put him on the hot seat.
But
it's like a warm seat.
Remember what he took over. It's so much better than what he took over. That's
I agree.
The thing.
He did a great job fixing the offensive line. That was the biggest thing. But I'm not willing to just be like, oh, well, yeah, Florida State's just going to win 11 games every year now. I'm not there yet with the Seminoles. And I also
I'm not there. Yeah.
And I also want to see DJ Uiagalelei, in another situation. I think that Oregon State situation was so perfect for him last year, and this is a new spot. So I want to see it a little bit. So
I will say, in Clemson's favor, they went 9-4 last year, 3 losses by 1 score, 2 losses in overtime. If you're looking, Dabo Swinney's record in 1-score games, I think before this downturn was like unreal. So if they can get some of those to go back the other way, maybe get back to what you were, but we'll see. The ACC is going to be really interesting. Like, for all the talk about, hey, the Big 12's wide open, anybody could win it. I think the ACC is going to be more open than we think. You've got Clemson, Florida State, Miami, but you've also got NC State as well. SMU's in there now. It's ACC is going to low key, I think, going to be a super interesting league this year.
SMU is a little bit of a wild card. Cal could be a little spicy. We did get on our Heisman draft. People said we forgot Jade Knott. That's probably the best. I think a lot of it is because it's a Heisman draft, and Cal is probably not going to win enough games to have him win the Heisman. Jade Knott's a great player. Anyway,
great player. By the way, did you see his commit? Did you see when he announced he was staying at Cal? He did this whole video. He just did like his whole video about how much he appreciated Cal, and it just everything was along the lines of he was.
Oh wait, yeah, I think I did see this.
And it fooled some reporters who didn't watch to the end and thought he announced he was leaving, and then at the end he says he was staying. I thought that was great. I'm glad he stayed, and he is a great player.
I agree with you. Well, who's the highest ranked G5 team? Where do teams with hot seat coaches and the sickos trying to renovate the dregs of college football on their dynasty modes fall on Chris's rankings? We're going to get into that more after a brief break. We'll be right back.
Cool. Real quick, Chris, will you pan down your laptop lid slightly after you finish coughing and make sure you guys are eye level with one another?
That worked.
Yeah, that would work. Okay. Let's go to the second part of this. Let's be cognizant about not talking over one another. There are a couple points there where we're overlapping each other, so let's let each other finish each other's thoughts. Let's pick it up at wide open Big 12. We'll come back to that and then keep on rolling. Awesome.
All right. Last week on the Until Saturday feed, we published our Big 12 Power Draft league preview. Chris, what's your Big 12 title game matchup?
I mean, if I'm going on the rankings that I put out, it's got to be Utah, Iowa State, who I think play near the end of the year. I have 6 Big 12 teams in my top 25. Utah, Iowa State, Kansas, Oklahoma State, and Arizona. A lot of teams I really like here. Teams that have quarterbacks or running backs that I really like. And I think might have been you, I think, had Iowa State as your sleeper team last week.
West Virginia at 27 too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that too. I'm with you on Iowa State. I think this team found itself in the second half of last year. Remember, by the way, they had a gambling scandal over them at the beginning of the season. They lost some guys. Like, it was a total mess. You don't have that this year, presumably. And you bring pretty much everybody back from that team. I think Iowa State bounces back to that 9-10 win type of year and contends for the Big 12. I'm a big fan of them. Kansas State, they'll be right there. Avery Johnson, I think, will have a breakout season. He'll be. I think I got him in our Heisman draft, actually. I also got Jalen Daniels, the Kansas quarterback. Hopefully he can stay healthy. Then we've got Ollie Gordon at Oklahoma State, best running back in the country. Noah Fafita, the quarterback at Arizona. Brent Brennan taking over as head coach. I like that. So there's a lot of like real solid teams in the Big 12, which will be fun for us. Every Big 12 week is going to have interesting games. But the Big 12 needs somebody to emerge from the pack. Justin Williams has written about this. Like, you are defined as a conference by what your best teams do. And if the Big 12 champion is like a 9-3 type of situation, that's not a great look. You're going to want someone to win 10 games here. So it feels more legit when you're getting a first round bye here. But I'm looking forward to the Big 12. What do you think?
Yeah, I think to some degree you're correct, but I think if you're sending a different champion into that bye every year, and that champion is winning that, what are we calling these games? Second round games? I don't know what to call them. Winning the first game that they play in the playoff I guess that'd be a quarterfinal, whatever. If they're doing that 4 out of 5 years, even if you are sending 9-3 champions, which is possible, I kind of think that actually helps the league, even if you don't have a team that, instead of holding on to that 4th spot as the last auto bid, is competing for, a number 2, number 3, maybe sniffing around number 1. I think the leagues are really, for better or worse, and I think probably for worse, because I think it's kind of a stupid argument, but I think the leagues are going to be shaped by how they perform in the playoff. And in the event that the Big 12 gets multiple teams in, you squeeze that large team in. If those teams can win, even if your top of the league isn't as salty as maybe it was before, I think that will change how people view the league. Chris, are we ready to do it? Are we going to do it? Are we going to talk buffs? We're on the internet. We got to be careful.
Is anybody from CBS here?
I hope not. Although that beef was squashed, I guess. We'll see.
Apparently. Whatever. So I've got Colorado at 51 here, just outside the top 50. I think they're gonna be better than they were. Offensive line can't be worse. Second year under a lot of things. You're the Colorado guy. You've been up there, like
going up there again.
51. Yeah. What do you think about that spot? 51. Like, is that a good ranking? Higher, lower?
Here's what I think is interesting about Colorado. Is there are certain people on the internet who would have you believe, oh, it's all great. Colorado is going to win 10 games again. They're going to be sniffing the playoff. They can win the Big 12. There are other people on the internet who would have you believe Colorado is a mess again. They're going to win 2 games. They're going to be, a disaster. You're going to have people fighting, all this stuff. I actually think Colorado has a pretty narrow room of a narrow ability to have varied results in 2024.
A narrow range of outcomes, yeah.
Yes, I think they're like a 5 to 7 win team. I would be very surprised if they finish outside of that window. I think that there is a slight chance, if Pat Shurmur is the next great offensive mind in college football, that they win 9 games. And if the lack of chemistry, the lack of togetherness on the roster, that is just what's going to be there based on how you put together a roster. If that falls apart and they lose to North Dakota State, lose to Nebraska early on, then I think there's a chance they could maybe win 3 games. But there's so much debate about this team, but if they finish outside of that 5 to 7 win window, I think I'll be very surprised, because I think this is a team that really probably upgraded its roster by 15% and downgraded its coaching staff by a lot. Pat Shurmur, there's not a lot of teams in college football that would hire him as their OC. He came onto that program in August last year.
Yes.
Is sort of running his own offense. I think it seems like, based on what I've seen, that a lot of him getting that job seems to be, we want to get Shedeur as ready for the NFL as possible in terms of terminology, in terms of reads, and Sean Lewis's system was not going to do that, despite the fact that they were winning some games early on with him. And then defensively, I really like they upgraded their defensive front big time, adding a Samuel Okunlala, Deion Hayes from Pitt. I think they got some really good pieces there. We'll see what Travis Hunter is in year 2 there as well. But the coaching staff is really, really green. Phil Lodeholt coming over from Oklahoma. You're giving a guy who's never coached a position before. He's a first-time position coach. You're tasking him with fixing your most troubled position with a bunch of new guys. That's a really hard thing to do. Yeah. So I think the roster is slightly better. The coaching staff, I think, is significantly worse. And don't forget, a defensive coordinator, Charles Kelly, was basically given carte blanche to run the defense as he saw fit, left after the season to go to Auburn, where he is not the play caller.
Yeah.
So take from that
just win that first game. If you lose that North Dakota State game, who knows where it's going to go. By the way, you mentioned Nebraska. They have them early on. I have Nebraska at 36. I'm a believer in the Huskers this year.
I wouldn't have them that high, Chris.
Famous last words. But defense was a lot better. Dylan Raiola comes in. I like Nebraska. Let's do the G5 here. This is going to be fascinating because, people are going to need to pay attention to this. A group of 5 team is going to the playoff. Yeah. And it's as wide open as it's ever been. I've got Boise State at 29, Liberty at 30, Memphis 31, App State down at 38. I think those are the 4 favorites. They're the favorites in their conferences. You got Tulane and Fresno State 42-43 there as well. But all of these teams have a tough game early on. Boise State goes to Oregon. Memphis goes to Florida State. App State goes to Clemson. Those are all in the first couple of weeks. Liberty, their toughest game is actually App State. So we'll see how that goes. But I think when you look at these teams, I got kind of questions about all of them, but there's a lot that I like. And let's talk about Boise State here, because
we need to.
On Sunday, Maddox Madsen beat out former number 1 recruit Malachi Nelson, transfer from USC to win the quarterback job. I have some thoughts, but Ubben, what was your reaction to hearing that?
A little surprised, but sometimes it just doesn't work with guys that, are big time. I think quarterback is a harder spot to scout. When you talk about the elite recruits, sometimes it can lie to you. Harrison Bailey's a pretty good recent example that he's playing in a system with a bunch of D1 guys in Georgia. And, you have Eric Gilbert, you have BJ Ojolari, you have a bunch of guys around you and a really good offensive system that make you put up some really good numbers, and you have the size and the arm talent. But when you get to college, it just doesn't work. Well, when a guy like Jadeveon Clowney shows up, you can't really miss on that. You're a big dude who's gigantic and fast. You're going to figure it out. Quarterback's a little bit more complicated. There's a lot. It seems to me that that's one of the more, similar to the NFL, it's easy to miss on guys. At this point, it's hard for me to see Malachi Nelson not being a pretty big miss. If USC is one thing. Obviously, there's a lot of competition there. You leave, Lincoln Riley is going to have a good quarterback period, but Boise State is kind of in a weird spot. And Madsen did beat out Taylon Green last year.
He did
to win that job in preseason, and then got hurt. So maybe there's a level of continuity with that staff, a little bit under Spencer Danielson, but very concerning, mildly surprising, not super surprising, but very concerning for the long term. If you bought Malachi Nelson stock, it's not in a great spot right now.
So a lot of Boise people are kind of freaked out about this because they're like, wait a minute, we have this 5-star guy. The national media loves Boise State because we have him. The fact that he didn't win, this is a problem. To which I say, you guys remember Maddox Madsen playing last year. He played well. He took the job from Taylon Green, who's now playing at Arkansas. So, I don't think it's that big of a deal. They got Dirk Cutter as the offensive coordinator. Very good coach. Knows what he's doing. To me, this didn't change at all my outlook on Boise State. But the group of 5 is going to be extremely, extremely fun. It kind of takes us into the next tier, the 44 to 53 range, which is is your coach going to be back next year range? This is South Carolina at 45, Colorado at 51, Arkansas at 52, Florida's at 35, they're a little bit high, but Florida at 35, Baylor's at 69. Is there a coach here you're least confident in this group won't be back next year?
If I'm gonna rank them, my number 1 is gonna be Billy Napier at Florida. There's been a lot of but what if he doesn't get fired? What if Florida's just really good this year? And to that, I would say it feels just kind of like a contrarian take for contrarian's sake. I don't see it with Florida. I don't see if you're saying Florida's going to be this 9-win team, 10-win team, and get Billy Napier off the mat and re-energize the program and change the trajectory of where this thing is going, I don't know that I see that. As far as the guy that's most safe, I kind of like what Shane Beamer is doing at South Carolina. I know it's been a little bit underwhelming. Yeah. It's really hard to win at South Carolina. And you add Rocket Sanders. We'll kind of see what Lenore Sellers does for them. Nick Harbor, we're still kind of waiting to see it. Freak athlete, but they kind of got to figure out, how to use him. And so I like the pieces there. I like what they can do. And I think you have some capital there. You've won some big games. You've gotten to bowl games. You've won bowl games. So and expectations are low there. I think Colorado, I'll be surprised if Deion is there after this season, just because I don't know that he wants to be a college football head coach of a team that does not have either of his sons or Travis Hunter on it. Arkansas, life's tough in the SEC, and you might have the interim coach on staff. And Baylor, we'll see. So,
Arkansas is the one. Yeah.
You're in.
Arkansas is the
one that's number ones for you and most pre-fired coach.
I think so, because like you said, Bobby Petrino's there as your coach, your interim head coach. But there's going to be a lot of people who want this job after the season. Do they make a push for a Gus Malzahn? Do they make a push for a Rhett Lashley? Do they go for Jeff Traylor, who has been there before? I think Arkansas, unless they, make a bowl game, win 7 games, surprise people, I think there's people there, especially with what they've done in basketball and John Calipari and all the excitement around that. They need to get excitement around football again. So Sam Pittman,
Arkansas has a complicated relationship with Gus Malzahn. Rhett Lashley, like if SMU has a big year, I think he would be a really interesting fit there. Jeff Traylor, I think, would be a hard sell to fans, just because you have to pitch, and I think there's a level of a lot of Arkansas fans who, I say this with kindness in my heart as a fellow Arkansan, there is some denial about your place in the world, Hog fans. I'm sorry to tell you this, but it's the days of 10-2 and competing for SEC championships every single year. I don't know that world is coming back. Chris, let's shift to the people who just got done with coaching searches. 58-70. The new coach, new me. In this group, we have Syracuse with Fran Brown. Exciting there, but they're going to have to play games now. They can't just recruit for now. And there's some limitations with the roster and a stadium that still does not have AC, as I understand it. Mississippi State with Jeff Lebby. Boston College with Bill O'Brien. Army down there, and then UCLA.
Army does not have a new coach, but they're
but they're still in that group. I was gonna say, I think Jeff Milk is still there. UCLA with Deshaun Foster, who if you missed it, they're in LA, and Michigan State with Jonathan Smith, who was my offseason coaching hire, MVP, whatever you want to call it. Chris, when you look at that group, who's gonna wake up just feeling like they're pushing the biggest boulder uphill?
Biggest boulder uphill is probably UCLA. They lost a lot.
Really?
The Big Ten is going to be a lot tougher. We did our Big Ten preview a couple weeks ago. They were pretty low on that power draft bit there. But I tell you, the teams I'm really interested in. Boston College, I'll get to in a minute in another section. But Mississippi State with Jeff Lebby. Blake Shapen is there, former Baylor quarterback, a guy who can throw it around. I kind of like that. I think Mississippi State could surprise some people this year. Not win 9 games or anything, but they could be better than people think in Jeff Lebby's first year there.
I think people forget we lived in a world where we had both a college football playoff and a number 1 ranked team called Mississippi State. These are things that happened. These are real things that happened in our lifetime. So, I think there's an idea that your ceiling is kind of low at Mississippi State, and to some degree, there's some truth there. We talked about that with Arkansas just now, but I think the ceiling is a little bit higher there than some people. You're not doomed to finish last in the SEC every single year in Starkville. I think some people think that's the case, and I totally disagree with that. Chris, let's look at the teams that are just kind of looking to make a bowl game. Teams 69 through 102. That starts with Baylor and goes all the way down to Hawaii. Shout out to Timmy Chang. When you look at this group, who stands out to you as the most interesting teams from 69 to 102?
I mean, I think it's got to be 71 Oregon State, 72 Washington State. The Pac-12.
The Pac-12, yes.
I don't know what to expect from them. They lost a lot of guys in the portal because of realignment, but they're also playing schedules that are very Mountain West heavy. So how much of that Pac-12 recruiting do you still have to give you an advantage over some Mountain West teams? We'll see. Obviously, I think I like Oregon State more, but you lost both DJ Uiagalelei and Aiden Childs. That is tough. A lot of group of 5 teams in here that are kind of rebuilding. Troy's got a new coach. James Madison's got a new coach. San Diego State's got a new coach. San Jose State has a new coach. I'm lower on UCLA and Illinois, I think, than most people are. We mentioned UCLA there. Illinois, there's just not a lot there, and they lost most of what their really good pieces were last year. I'm higher on Indiana than most folks. I know they're kind of starting from the bottom, but I really like adding Curtis Rourke. I like some of the transfers that they did. Kurt Cignetti's a really good coach. So I got Indiana at 81, Illinois at 82. This is the lower end of the Power Four, and the last ranked Power Four team is Vanderbilt at 95. Cincinnati's at 94, not far behind. I was really down on them. Some Cincinnati fans were not happy about that, but that's kind of the bottom of the Power Four, middle tier of the G5, where it's like we just get 6 and 6, 7 and 5, win a bowl game. Like that's a good season and back in the right direction. Is there anybody here who's interesting to you?
People sleeping on Jackson State a little bit.
Jacksonville State.
Jacksonville State. Excuse me.
That's how much you're sleeping on them.
That's how much sleep. I think I've been spending too much time on the Dion beat. But yes, Jacksonville State. I think people didn't really know what to make of them last year, and everybody's paying a lot of attention to Sam Houston State and kind of seeing what James Madison's going to keep doing, and all of these teams that are moving up. And Jacksonville State, the Fighting Rich Rods, win 9 games last year, get a little spicy. I don't know what's in store for them this year. They lost a couple guys to higher division teams. That's always going to be the reality for them. But you talk about Chip Kelly scheming up some ball plays. Rich Rod still got some stuff in his bag. We saw a little bit of that last year. So keep an eye on them. And I will say also, Chris, I just finished the second go around of my CFB 25 year 1 dynasty. Heisman winner Curtis Rourke at Indiana. So
there you go.
It is what it is.
That was, by the way, I had Ohio. They went 10-3 last year. I had them down at 98, and some Ohio fans were not happy about that. It's really just because you're starting quarterback left and you're starting running back left for Minnesota. Like that's just the MAC is just getting destroyed in the portal. Every team is, and it's going to be really hard to sustain there. So we'll see.
Let's go with the teams that if you do have a CFB 25 dynasty, you're very familiar with these teams, probably more so than in previous years, from 120 to 134. That starts with UConn, goes all the way down to the Kennesaw State Owls. Chris, who do you like to lay down some fresh brick on the foundation and start something this year?
I tell you, New Mexico, who I have at 122, like they may have made the best hire of the coaching cycle, like all things considered, who you are. Bronco Mendenhall took Virginia to the Orange Bowl. He was a very successful coach at BYU, and he's coached in New Mexico before. Like, I think that was a huge, huge hire. It's going to take some time at a lot of these places, but I am buying New Mexico stock kind of for the long term here. I think Bronco Mendenhall is going to figure. He's got the gang back together. A lot of the guys he coached with before. I like what they have there. Is there anybody here who you think could surprise?
It's interesting. I got to spend some time this offseason with Kenny Burns, the new head coach. Sort of he'll be in his second year at Kent State. And their lot in life is difficult. And he inherited a situation where Sean Lewis left. Their staff kind of broke up a little bit. He came over from PJ Fleck's staff, and their roster was pretty decimated. A bunch of those guys went to Colorado, and they had to kind of figure it out. And, I think the year 1 for them was a lot about figuring out who wants to be here, who is invested in Kent State. In year 2, I think they could see some upward mobility as they kind of get their hands around that. I really think Kenny is a really bright coach and a guy that I think, can start building the culture. He's definitely a big culture guy. He's wanted to be a head coach for a long time, and this is an opportunity that he got. So I'd say keep an eye out for. I think Kent State will probably not be 1-11 again, and will not be in the basement. And also Biff Poggi at Charlotte. I'm very curious how that plays out. I think there's some upside there.
I don't know. Kent State, by the way, I had 133. They were dead last year. Now they're second to last. Charlotte at 127, coming off a 3-9 season. One other team I'm interested in here, Sam Houston, who I've got at 117. They started last year like 0-8 or something like that. And they lost a ton of games by one score, but they won 3 of their last 4 games, and 5 of those losses were by one score. They were a play away from beating Liberty.
Yeah, I remember they were the last they were the last team without a win, and it was hard to believe that they were 0-8.
Yeah, so like I think they could take a big step forward this year now that they got their FBS feet under them. So keep an eye out on them as well.
Well, that's the first edition of the 134. Chris, real quick, who do you like that's not in the top 50 that has a chance to get in the top 10?
So like my favorite thing, one of my favorite thing with the 134 rankings is how much I get right at the end of the year. At the end of the year, when I do the final rankings, I include the preseason ranking. 17 of my preseason top 25 last year were in the final top 25. I think that's pretty good. 6 of the top 10 as well. But I also like when teams come out of nowhere to finish in the top 10. 2 years ago, Tulane and Washington, outside the top 50 to start the year, finish in the top 10. Last year, Missouri, outside the top 50 to start the year, finish in the top 10. So who could that be this year? And as I look through the group, you can't say anybody's obvious because the whole point is that it's not obvious. But keep an eye on Boston College. They have Bill O'Brien there, who did a very good job at Penn State as a head coach back in the day. They got a quarterback in Thomas Castellanos, and they avoid Clemson, Miami, and Notre Dame on the schedule. So could Boston College come out of nowhere and win the ACC and finish in the top 10? Like, yeah, it's a long shot, but that's the point. And so if I did pick a team outside that top 50 who like could surprisingly make a run somewhere, I'm going to go Boston College.
I like it. Well, Chris, let's keep it moving. It's time to dig into the mailbag. We really appreciate you guys adding a lot to the show by leaving us voicemails, leaving us messages. Again, that voicemail line is 316-462-9852. So we're going to play a couple of voicemails here in a second. But if you want to hear your voice on our show, yell at us, pat us on the back, whatever, that's the place to do it. Again, that line is 316-462-9852. So first up, we have Patrick from Pennsylvania. Let's hear it.
Yeah. I'm just going to wonder if this when you're going to actually have a objective panel on the show, because the snarky Bama, anti-Bama comments are getting old, period. If Bama goes 8-4, is Saban going to be able to be objective and tell them what's wrong, period? If Alabama's 12-0, are you jackwagons going to actually say, we're eating humble pie because we were wrong? Nope, I don't think so.
This is a bit like playing poker, Chris, and somebody throws down a full house and bets into you, and then you're holding like quad aces at that point. Because I don't know if you missed the first part of the show. Patrick sent that voicemail before the first part of the show, but Damien Harris is joining the show. Did a few things in Alabama, played under Nick Saban. So I think we're gonna have a plenty of thoughts about Bama, and for an anti-Bama show, we are gonna have 1/3 of our panel on most of the shows be a former Alabama player. So I feel like I think we're gonna be okay.
I didn't realize there was such an anti-Bama bias on the show. I mean, when Ari was here, we know he talked up the recruiting rankings all the time.
Yeah, I mean, last year I just didn't love it.
was always there.
Last year
it was
I
a rough year for Alabama.
Yeah, I know. Believe me, the fact that they got to where they got to. I mean, last year, low key was one of Nick Saban's best coaching jobs ever. I still think. Yeah. And they got hot late, and they won a bunch of games that I'm not going to say they shouldn't have won them, but they were some nail biters in there, and falling behind and rallying and figuring out their quarterback situation. It was a lot of building the plane in the air situation with Bama last year. So props to them. But I think we just were very skeptical of Alabama and them all last year. So
you know who else was critical of who else was critical of Alabama last year? Nick Saban was.
Yes.
That's the standard that they set. So we'll see how Alabama is this year.
Yeah. Next voicemail.
Hey y'all, this is Mason down in Jensen Beach, Florida. And all the discourse around the playoffs seems to kind of assume that the 4 buys from auto bids are going to go to Power 4 schools. My question for you is, how much chaos do we have to see in the Big 12 or the ACC to see one of those spots go to the Group of 5 champion? I think of a year when Cincinnati made a 14 playoff without an auto bid structure. I think of a world where an 8th ranked Big 12 front runner loses to a 19th ranked Big 12 regular season runner up in a conference game, and you have a Boise State sitting undefeated, ranked 9. Is that a realistic scenario, or do y'all feel pretty safe in assuming that those 4 slots are going to Power 4 champions? Thanks a bunch. Giga Maggies.
So Chris, I think we referenced this on our show not that long ago. I can't remember if you were on it or not. I think you were. If you redid college football, if you took the conferences as they are now and you hit the rerun button, that's kind of more like a dog barking, but that's okay.
No, that was a good noise.
Okay, thank you. You hit the rewind button to like 2006 and you kept the 12-team playoff. I think you would see it with relative, I'm not going to say frequency, but there were just a lot more teams in that Group of 5 that could put together top tier rosters. You had the Cincinnatis, you had the UCFs, you had Utah, you had TCU, you had teams that, like, if you disrespected them, you exposed yourself as a non-ball knower. If you thought, oh, it's just Utah, they're not going to do anything, and then you show up to Sugar Bowl and they're beating the crap out of a Nick Saban Alabama team, it's like, yeah, that's Utah. Where we're at now, I mean, we talked about the G5 earlier in the show, Chris. Boise State, Liberty, Memphis, App State, Tulane, Fresno State. These are all teams that are the cream of the crop in the G5. And if you compare them to some of the teams that got into the BCS, that got into New Year's 6 games and won games, I don't think those teams measure up. I mean, Liberty last year, and I'm not saying this just because of what happened with Oregon, that Liberty team would probably not make the top 15, top 10 of if you ranked all of the Power 5 or all of the G5 teams that qualify for BCS bowls and New Year's 6 bowls. So the fact that you've had all these teams move up into leagues, I don't think we're going to see it. I think it would take something kind of insane to see one of those teams get one of the buys. Am I wrong?
I don't think it's insane. Especially if the Big 12 champions a 9-3 type of situation. The problem is I don't see any of ththose Group of 5 teams going 12-0. Not counting Liberty, and Liberty's not going to get the benefit of the out there. I just mentioned, if Memphis goes to Florida State and wins, and they're undefeated, then they got a shot. App State, Clemson, like there are chances, but G5 team's not getting that top 4 unless you're undefeated and you've beaten a good Power 5 team. And it's
the problem is that I wrote about this in the early days of the Athletic. This was like 2017. I wrote about the blueprint for getting in because that's what we're talking about here. If we're talking about the top 4, it's basically the concept of getting in the old playoff. And I think what none of these teams have this year is a 2023 season that you can build off of. That they'll say that they don't factor it in, but the committee is going to be thinking about what you did in the year before to come in and playing a big time preseason game. Memphis, or big time non-conference game. Memphis has that Florida State game. Boise State has that Oregon game, which, by the way, are we going to call that the Byron Hout LeGarrette Blount Memorial? Can we get them out there and have like a Rock'em Sock'em Robot rematch before the game of some kind?
We should.
I'd like to see that. Have those teams played since that Thursday night game?
Probably. They play.
I don't know.
All those Pac-12 teams play those Mountain West teams usually.
Yeah, shout out to Byron Hout and LeGarrette Blount, because that was one of the funniest season openers. Those games always stand out because everybody's watching them. I mean, that game, the Kenny Trill game, like those first Thursday night games this year, I'll be at the Colorado and North Dakota State game. The people are going to be watching that game. So anyway,
they played in 2017 in Boise State.
Was LeGarrette Blount there?
Must have been a bowl game. It looked like it was in December.
I could see Boise not wanting to roll out Byron Hout because he did get punched, but LeGarrette Blount, I feel like has to be like
Las
an
Vegas
honorary
bowl.
Captain or something.
Las Vegas
count. Bowl game doesn't count. Anyway, but there's not a team that has all of the factors that I wrote about where you have a 2023 season to build off of. Liberty, for better or worse, had that year, and I think it's going to be like an albatross around their neck, the way that they performed in the Oregon game. And then they're not starting high enough because the committee has shown pretty consistently that they are not going to move up G5 teams for dominating their leagues. This was an issue. Who was the team 2 years ago that I'm forgetting about? Maybe it was. I don't think it was Cincinnati. Maybe it was Cincinnati. But anyway,
Tulane?
I don't remember. I don't think it was Tulane. It was a team that maybe it was Cincinnati. It was a team that clearly was getting just completely underranked all season long. Regardless, the committee has not been friendly to the G5, and there's not a team that's going to be able to start really, really high in the preseason, which they don't have a preseason poll. And if Memphis beats Florida State, maybe that changes it, but I don't think so.
I would just say in this format, all you got to do is be ranked higher than the Big 12 champ.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard. It's not like making a 4-team at large because you don't got to beat all the SEC teams, but it's possible. It's just going to be unlikely because I don't think you're going to have 12-0 G5 teams like you used to.
Yeah. Jim L asks, everyone has come to realize that the 5th seed in the CFP has a huge advantage. Any chance the committee re-ranks after the home field games? Chris?
No. There is an advantage. The idea being, hey, if you're the 5th seed, you're the SEC or Big Ten championship game loser, you get a home game, you win, you play the 4th seed, who's your Big 12 or ACC champion, whom you might be favored in. They're not going to re-rank because all the bowls are going to be set when they set the brackets. So the bowls want to know which 3 or so teams that they could be dealing with. That's semifinals, is quarterfinals. That's all of it. So no, I don't see a reseeding happening. We also don't know what 8-9 could be. We don't know. And plus there's the possibility that the Big Ten pushes through. We get a 14-team playoff in 2026. We don't even have this. Then we don't even have this
I think
5-seed issue because the 4 seed's not getting a bye.
I'm very intrigued to see what, I don't know if buyer's remorse is the right term, maybe just unintended consequences of building out the playoff the way that it is and kind of seeing what that looks like and what that means. But I think this is one of those situations, but who's going to benefit from this? Probably the Big Ten, probably the SEC. I don't think they're going to be that motivated to change. So I don't think we're going to see a lot of, because most of the time in that 5 spot, like you said, we're going to have an Ohio State from last year, or have an Alabama or not a Georgia from last year that is going to be a team that probably might be able to coast its way into the semifinals. So naming what these rounds are that's going to be a learning curve. I think
your 1 through 4s, they don't want to have they don't want to have 8 different teams they might play. They want to know we're playing this team or that team. That's who we're going to study for the week leading up to the game. So
yeah. Jasper S asks, what are the pros and cons of having divisions versus not? I get the whole look at the Big Ten West versus East records, but to me, but is it just me that thinks divisions just make more sense? We're kind of through the looking glass on this, Chris. divisions would not fix the current issue. The scheduling is going to be very stupid. You have these 18-team, 16-team leagues. Splitting them into divisions you can't even really play everybody in a division because you're not just going to play one crossover game. That's not going to be something that happens. I like divisions in a 10-team league. In the current setup, I don't really think it matters. I don't think it affects that much personally. The scheduling is going to be dumb either way.
I like the idea, but in the concept of only your division games would determine who wins the division, because conference schedules now are going to be so uneven because they're so big. And you're going to have situations, you're going to have a lot of tiebreakers determining who plays in these championship games, and who you play, what your schedule is going to determine who makes the championship game. So I miss divisions. I thought they were good, but we're not going back.
Yeah. If you want to get a hold of us, again, that's 316-462-9852. We really like the voicemails. They add a lot to the show. It's good to hear you guys, get a feel for you. So again, leave us a voicemail, 316-462-9852. Chris, it's that time. It's crunch time. Are you ready?
I'm ready. This is my first one.
Nice. I had some puppy chow earlier. That was the real crunch time. But
Good call.
Chris, the people are talking about it again. They want to talk about fall weddings. I think there was a viral tweet going around showing the October 12th schedule. The Ohio State Oregon game Texas, Oklahoma, LSU, Ole Miss. The Knot, which anybody who's been married is familiar with that website, is the 5th most popular wedding day of the year. So they say that day is the 5th most popular wedding day of the year. Chris, where are we at on the fall wedding situation, the conversation?
I used to be one of these no fall wedding guys. I got married in July to avoid football season. But that was more than a decade ago. And it's a different world now. And you can watch any game anywhere you want at any time. You're not really sacrificing anything to me if you're going. You can go to a wedding, watch every game on your phone. Nobody's going to care. Everybody's bride and groom are too busy. Everybody's
after the ceremony. You can't do it in the ceremony. The reception, if you just set it up on the table, nobody will care. You're right.
I don't think anybody would care at the ceremony, if we're being honest.
Are you serious? No, Chris. You cannot have it.
I mean, I don't mean like you're in the wedding party and you're up there on the. I just mean if you're like sitting in the back in one of the benches or something like that and you're watching it. Yeah, it's rude, but nobody's gonna really care. I totally just think you can get 4K.
It's only like a 30-minute thing.
You can get 4K games on your phone better than we had in TV 10 years ago. Like, to me, it's not a conundrum anymore because you don't have to really give up all that much.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I generally just think people can do whatever they want to do. If you don't want to go to a wedding, I mean, at some level. So I have some experience with this. Not a fall wedding, but my brother got married in December of 2014. Let me tell you what was happening on that Saturday. We had Baylor playing. Baylor was playing in the morning. It was the doubleheader, the Baylor TCU doubleheader, basically. One of them was playing Iowa State. One of them was playing, I don't remember who was playing, but they were competing for that last spot. And a lot of people did both games. And I was doing TV at Fox at the time. And I just didn't. I mean, I got to watch a little bit of the game in the morning at the hotel, but I just went to my brother's wedding. It was my brother. Listen, it's fine. It's not that big a deal to like skip a weekend too. If you're like I said, if your livelihood is tied to it, like ours, like if I'm already married. If I was going to get married again, I would not get married during the season just because that's my job. But like, if you need to skip a Saturday, whether you're a fan, whether you are somebody who works in it, it's not the end of the world. So I'm a chill out sort of guy here, and it's not. I'm not going to break a friendship over somebody scheduling a fall wedding. But there are tiers of your relationships to those people. That sort of, if it's a friend, if I barely made the cut of the wedding list, I don't know that I'm going to probably go during the season. But if I am either in the wedding party or close to the wedding party or somebody that I see a lot, I'm probably going to go to the wedding on Saturday. So it's fine. It's not that big a deal. Chris, I don't know if you're a Michigan guy. I don't know if you keep up on the coaching moves at the high school ranks. We got a big one. Detroit Mumford. They finally, we've been talking about this on the pod for months. We knew that the Mumford guys had to find a new defensive coordinator. The surge has been ongoing. The media crush has been constant, but they found one. Connor Stalions is the new defensive coordinator, Detroit Mumford High School. Chris, can you offer a little context for what I don't know anything about the Detroit area or how good is Mumford? How big is this school? What is their football tradition? Can you offer any context to us that are not from Detroit? You have a Lions helmet in your background.
Not really. Mumford's not been one of the schools that has popped to mind when I see them in brackets and stuff like that. The funniest part to me is that Mumford High School, by the way, if anybody has seen Beverly Hills Cop, Axel Foley, Eddie Murphy's wearing a Mumford Physical Education Department shirt. In that movie, and that's the first thing that popped in mind, which I thought was a pretty hilarious connection. Look, Connor Stalions wanted a coaching job. He hoped he could follow Jim Harbaugh to Los Angeles. It didn't happen. He's not going to get another college job, maybe ever for a long time, especially depending on when these NCAA penalties come down. But guy wants to keep coaching. I guess there were 6 reporters. I guess went to a recent practice. He sprinted out
Saturday,
taking questions. Yeah.
For some reason, they delayed practice like 6 hours. They were supposed to go out there at 9 and they ended up at 3. I guess William McMichael's the head coach. Said that he's not allowed to say anything until the on Netflix drops August 20th, which makes sense because we haven't heard from Contenders Stallions at all, and Netflix is going to be the first time we kind of hear anything from him. So,
which I don't. Again, I've said it a million times. I do not expect him to say anything of interest on this. He's not going to reveal things. He's not going to tell you what. I'm sure he'll say he would do it all again. Funny thing is that actually, I had a dream. I was hanging out with Contenders Stallions trying to get the story the day before this news dropped. So that was weird.
Yeah, I don't think you got it. Also, Chris, Tennessee on fire on the recruiting trail. They land David Sanders Jr., the number 3 overall prospect, number 1 offensive tackle on Saturday. Sunday, they flipped 4-star linebacker Jaden Harmon from Alabama. 2 weeks ago, they already had landed the top prospect in 2026 quarterback, Faison Brandon, which I got to say, every time I see his name, I think of Donald Faison from Scrubs. They're spelled different. It's very confusing. And that's going to be like, I'm going to have more trouble with Faison Brandon, not calling him Donald Faison or Brandon Faison than I do with Nico Iamaleava. I'll just tell you.
It makes me think of FaZe Clan and the esports group that they've got, because they're all FaZe something. And I keep thinking it's Faison, but it's not. Look, Tennessee's been crushing it on the recruiting trail for a bit here. Josh Heupel's doing great things. I'm sure it helps that Nick Saban's not there anymore at Alabama. But look, Tennessee, man, they were down for a while. And ever since Josh Heupel came in, man, just everything is going well for them. Everything is
kind of crazy. I think Vols are not the usual suspects in this kind of rarefied recruiting air. Right now, their 2025 class is ranked 6th. They're on track to probably have the best class they've had since the heyday of Philip Fulmer, kind of in the pre kind of recruiting service era. But they have a program with very good trend lines. Like, they're clearly still trending up, where they're doing some stuff. You're not selling a dream, but you still need some guys to get you over the hump. I think that's a positive selling point for people. We're in this house, on this site, we recognize that collectives exist. And Tennessee's is very well funded, and it's not a shot at coaches or cheating to have guys get paid probably more than a lot of competition. Yeah. And they have a staff and a head coach that I think is very well suited for the player empowerment era. Like, Josh Heupel treats guys like adults, and it's not sort of a my way or the highway sort of approach. When he first took over at Tennessee, I wrote about how he ran his program at UCF, and it's not like the players are in charge, but it feels more like a partnership than a dictatorship in some ways. And the way that they operate, and everything I've heard out of Tennessee since they've been there, is that guys really look forward to being in the facility and being around the team. And I think that's some vibes that recruits can pick up on and want to be a part of. So shout out to Tennessee. I think they got a big season ahead. And Chris, I gotta send out an apology. This is my bad. I may have cursed our beloved Colin Lacey, Louisville wide receiver. On Thursday, we did our sleepers show, and myself and Manny Navarro were talking about the Louisville receivers, and I gave a lot of love to Colin Lacey, who I feel like people were sleeping on, was going to have a big year. And then Saturday morning at practice, he broke his collarbone. He is out 6 to 8 weeks. The good news for me is that if it doesn't work out, I can just say, well, he was hurt, and I was right anyway. But the bad news is I feel bad for cursing Mr. Colin Lacey, South Alabama transfer. Hopefully he is back on the field, healing. That's a tough deal. I hate preseason injuries. It's tough in camp. It's natural. Camp is a lot more physical than during the season. A lot more guys hitting the ground. I didn't hear how it happened, but I guess probably diving after a catch or something like that. You're only thudding. You're not really hitting super hard. But hopefully he gets healed, and hopefully I don't curse any more players. So if anyone gets hurt, I'm sorry.
There have been a lot of notable fall camp injuries this year.
Yeah.
College and the NFL. We mentioned season-ending injury at Notre Dame offensive line. CJ Baxter, Texas, out for the year. Texas lost 2 running backs. You've got this one as well. So stay healthy out there, folks.
Yeah.
Be careful.
Well, that's today's Until Saturday. Remember, next week we're going to 3 shows each week. I'm excited about that. The season's here. We're in week 0. Thank you for listening and watching. We're excited to have Damien Harris in the feed this season. And of course, be sure to follow the podcast on Apple and Spotify. Leave a 5-star review. It's greatly appreciated. Helps the show. Helps us bring you the show. Tell us what you love about the show. And of course, call the phone line at 316-462-9852. Let us know what you love, what you hate. We love hearing from you guys. It's always fun. It adds so much to the show. And check out our Spotify poll. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're cruising in on 10,000 subscribers there. The link to everything that we've talked about today is in the show's description. So for Damien, for Chris, I am your host, David Ubben, on Until Saturday. We will be back on Friday. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. And as always, bring back the turnover chain. We'll see you guys again on Friday.